The peaceful galaxy had existed for millennia, governed by a delicate balance of power among the dominant species. The Phoenixians, an advanced and enlightened race, had kept the galaxy in check with their immense technological capabilities and philosophical understanding of the universe. The Velrani, with their sophisticated military tactics, had maintained an iron grip on strategic territories, ensuring no species grew too powerful. And the Kranith, a peaceful race of farmers and diplomats, quietly settled the outer rim, offering their wisdom and resources to all in need. But in the quietest corner of the galaxy, humanity had watched the stars in silence. Their home, Earth, was a primitive world by galactic standards, a chaotic mixture of progress and destruction, of war and peace. The human race had long been ignored by the galactic powers, thought of as a forgotten relic of an insignificant species. The vastness of space had never been kind to humanity. For generations, the people of Earth had looked beyond their world, dreaming of the stars but never quite able to reach them. Until now. The Odyssey, a sleek and ambitious human exploration vessel, had been silently gliding through the void for years, quietly studying the far reaches of the galaxy. The humans had kept their intentions hidden. In the public eye, they were explorers seeking knowledge. But behind closed doors, Captain Alara Vance knew the truth. Humanity was not just seeking to explore. They were preparing to rise. They had finally developed technology that could match the most sophisticated fleets in the galaxy, a weapon crafted from desperation, innovation, and the kind of ingenuity that only humans could possess. The Odyssey's mission was twofold. First, they would prove humanity's ability to stand shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful races. Second, they would show that humanity had the capacity to reshape the future, no matter the cost. Ilara's mind raced as the ship's sensors detected something impossible. A Phoenixian cruiser far beyond the outer rim, close to a cluster of unstable stars. It was a quiet and isolated sector of the galaxy, known to be a buffer zone between Phoenixian and Velrani territories. Yet here it was, a lone cruiser patrolling an area that no one would dare to claim. Was this a deliberate provocation, or just routine reconnaissance? Either way, it presented an opportunity. Ilara knew this could be the moment they had been waiting for. "Captain," Lieutenant Nash said, his voice low and hesitant, "are we sure about this?" Ilara looked up from the holographic star chart, her eyes burning with the resolve of someone who had nothing left to lose. "We've trained for this. We've prepared for years. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. If they don't respect us now, they'll never have the chance to again." The Odyssey adjusted its course toward the Phoenixian cruiser. Ilara had no illusions. This wouldn't be a simple skirmish. The Phoenixians were known for their calm demeanor, their unwavering belief in the sanctity of their peace. They had no interest in war, and even less interest in conflict with a species they considered insignificant. But human tenacity was different. Humans did not just fight for survival, they fought to prove they deserved a place among the stars. As the Odyssey closed the gap, Ilara could see the Phoenixian cruiser clearly now, a massive, elegant structure, its surface shimmering with alien energy fields. They were on a collision course, and the Phoenixians were not responding to hails. Ilara wasn't concerned with diplomacy. She had no intention of giving them the luxury of time. "Activate the disruptors," Ilara commanded. "We need to disable their engines before they can react." A low hum filled the ship as the Odyssey's weapon systems powered up. The crew, tense but resolute, prepared for the clash. In the seconds that followed, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the Odyssey's disruptor beams shot forward, hitting the Phoenixian cruiser's power grid. The Phoenixians responded immediately, a surge of energy flooding the cruiser's shields. The Odyssey rocked with the intensity of their retaliatory fire, but Ilara wasn't afraid. This was the test they had been waiting for, the first strike that would shatter the illusion of human inferiority. On board the Phoenixian cruiser, Captain Varus was more than just surprised. He had not expected the humans to be so bold, so willing to engage with such ferocity. The Phoenixians had never seen a species so willing to fight without reason. "This isn't a simple mistake," Varus muttered, his hand hovering over the tactical controls. "They're testing us. They're daring us to retaliate." And so the war began, not with a thunderous clash of fleets, but with a single, deliberate act of defiance. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and it was not going to be erased easily. The Phoenixians, who had thought themselves untouchable, were about to learn what the galaxy had overlooked for far too long: human spirit. The galaxy was no longer silent. The roar of humanity. The Phoenixian cruiser shuddered as the Odyssey's disruptor beams slammed into its shields, sending ripples of energy across its sleek surface. Inside the Phoenixian ship, the atmosphere turned tense. The crew had trained for hundreds of years to maintain peace and neutrality, and yet here they were, facing an unexpected enemy: humanity. Captain Varus, a veteran of countless diplomatic missions, knew that this could not be the way they would deal with such a threat. But the humans had crossed a line, and now they were making a bold statement. The question was, how far would they push? "Shields holding," Lieutenant Thal reported, his voice steady, though his fingers trembled on the control panel. "However, their disruptor beams are more effective than anticipated. The outer layers are at 60% integrity." Varus narrowed his eyes, frustration creasing his brow. The humans had far more advanced technology than the Phoenixians had expected. They had assumed humanity was still in the early stages of intergalactic travel, no match for any of the established powers. And yet, here they were, with weapons capable of making a dent in Phoenixian technology. That fact alone made the situation even more dangerous. "We're underestimating them," Varus muttered to himself. "They're not just a nuisance, they're a threat." The human ship had proven its capacity for innovation, and now they were proving something else entirely: resolve. What Varus couldn't comprehend was how a species so young, so new to space exploration, had gained such advanced technology in such a short time. There was an air of mystery surrounding humanity. How had they gotten to this point, and what did they want from the "Galaxy, prepare to return fire," Varus ordered. He stood, walking toward the front of the bridge where the viewports displayed the empty space around them, the distance between them and the Odyssey narrowing with every passing second. Back aboard the Odyssey, Captain Alara Vance stared out at the flickering holographic image of the Phoenixian cruiser. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was the moment humanity had waited for. She had no illusions. This wasn't going to be a simple fight. She didn't expect to win this battle easily, but this was their message to the galaxy. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity wasn't to be ignored. Humanity could and would fight for its place in the stars. "Return fire," she commanded. "Focus on their engines." Her voice rang with the authority of someone who had long ago accepted that peace would never come easily for humans. The galaxy's complacency had left them vulnerable. No one had bothered to look at Earth and think, what if? What if this planet's people weren't as weak as they appeared? What if their resolve was more powerful than anyone imagined? It was time for the galaxy to find out. The Odyssey's weapons systems flared to life once more, firing targeted bursts at the Phoenixian cruisers' engines. It wasn't an all-out assault. It wasn't yet time for that. The goal was disruption, to send a message without inciting full-scale war. Humanity wasn't about to wage a conflict they weren't ready for, but they weren't going to let the galaxy ignore them either. The Phoenixian ship's shields flickered again under the force of the fire, but it wasn't enough to break through. "Captain, they're retaliating," Lieutenant Nash reported, his voice tinged with concern. The Phoenixian ship's weapons were charging rapidly, and Alara knew that their next strike would be stronger. "We knew they wouldn't just stand down," she replied calmly, though her mind raced. "Prepare evasive maneuvers. We don't need to win yet. We just need to send the message." The Odyssey lurched as the Phoenixian return fire hit the ship's shields, but the humans were ready. Ilara's command was quick and decisive. The Odyssey twisted sharply to the side, using the gravity of a nearby asteroid field to assist with its evasive maneuvers. The Phoenixian fire missed, and the human ship gained precious moments. On the Phoenixian cruiser, the captain's frustration grew. His shields were holding, but the humans had proven resourceful, unpredictable, and much more dangerous than anticipated. "They're using the asteroid field to their advantage," Varys muttered. "They're adapting. Fast." "Sir," Lieutenant Thal spoke hesitantly, "the human ship is unlike anything we've seen. Their technology? It's beyond us. And the way they fight, it's unlike any species we've encountered. They're not afraid to act impulsively, recklessly even." Varys took a deep breath, considering his options. He had to acknowledge the truth. Humanity had not just fired shots at them, they had fired shots that would make the galaxy take notice. The Phoenixian war machine was large and well-equipped, but the humans were not playing by the rules. "Let's put an end to this," Varys decided. "We'll have to go to full force. There's no other way to show them that we are in control." He activated the cruiser's main weapons, adjusting the targeting systems to ensure a direct hit. They would not simply disable the human ship, they would destroy it. But as the targeting reticle aligned, Varys hesitated. This was not a simple skirmish. This wasn't a minor annoyance that could be eliminated. This was humanity's first statement to the galaxy, and if he destroyed their ship, he would be signing the galaxy's fate. Ilara, on the Odyssey, had no such hesitation. The battle was far from over. The galaxy would learn to respect humans. The quiet tension between the two ships stretched on, the space between them a thin thread holding the galaxy's fate. Captain Ilara Vance stood at the command center of the Odyssey, her fingers gripping the edge of the console as she watched. The Phoenixian cruiser's movements. Their responses were predictable now, methodical and deliberate. But what the Phoenixians did not understand was that humans weren't predictable. They were scrappy, inventive, and above all, relentless. "Captain," Lieutenant Nash spoke again, his voice urgent. "They've locked onto us with their primary weapons. It looks like they're preparing to unleash everything they've got." Ilara's gaze never wavered from the readout. The Phoenixians were a formidable force, no doubt about that. But they had underestimated humanity's drive. The Phoenixian cruiser had responded predictably to the Odyssey's initial strike, a calm and disciplined approach to neutralizing what they saw as a nuisance. What they hadn't prepared for was the human's ability to turn every weakness into a strength, to innovate in the face of overwhelming odds. "We're not backing down," Ilara said, her voice sharp. "Activate the secondary disruptors. Prepare for a full strike if necessary." On the bridge, the crew of the Odyssey moved with purpose. There was no panic, only focus. They had prepared for a battle like this for years, training to outsmart, outthink, and outlast the galaxy's greatest powers. In their hearts, every crew member knew the stakes. If they could prove humanity's worth now, the entire galaxy would have to acknowledge them. There was no going back. Across the expanse of space, the Phoenixian cruiser's massive weapons array began to hum, its systems coming to life with terrifying precision. Captain Varys watched the targeting reticles, his hands hovering over the command controls. He was moments away from unleashing a devastating barrage, but a voice in the back of his mind told him that this wasn't right. The humans weren't following the rules of engagement. They weren't adhering to the proper procedures or showing the restraint that the Phoenixians valued. Instead, they were attacking with everything they had, even when they knew they were at a disadvantage. Varys found that unpredictability both terrifying and fascinating. "Captain, we've confirmed their disruptor beam is at full power," Lieutenant Thal reported, breaking his captain's reverie. They've disabled our outer thrusters. They can't escape, and neither can we. Varys looked at the report. His mind raced. The humans had expertly targeted the weakest points in the cruiser's outer systems. Just enough to create an opening, just enough to force a confrontation. But how had they known exactly where to strike? How had they figured out their weak spots with such precision? It was almost as if they had anticipated their every move. We underestimated them, Varys said grimly. He finally gave the order. Fire! The Phoenixian cruiser's primary weapons flared with a deafening roar, sending multiple blasts toward the Odyssey. But in a split second, Ilara's quick thinking kicked in. Now, she commanded. The Odyssey's maneuvering thrusters screamed to life, pushing the ship into a sudden, erratic turn. The Phoenixian fire narrowly missed the ship as it darted and weaved through space, the precision of human engineering and sheer ingenuity giving them the edge. But the Phoenixians were fast learners. "Captain, they've adapted," Lieutenant Nash shouted. "They're anticipating our movements." Ilara nodded, her lips set in a thin line. She had expected this. The Phoenixians were nothing if not adaptable, but so were humans. Every time they were cornered, every time they were faced with an obstacle, they found a way to push forward. She wasn't about to let the Phoenixians believe they were the superior species. This fight wasn't over yet. "Deploy the decoy drones," Ilara ordered, and a series of small explosive drones shot out from the Odyssey's ports, scattering into the blackness of space. Each drone was equipped with a basic radar signature designed to confuse enemy targeting systems and buy the Odyssey time. The Phoenixian cruiser fired again, but this time their shots missed by a mile as the drones created chaos within their targeting systems. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it gave the Odyssey a fleeting window. "Take us to 40% power," Ilara ordered, her mind calculating the next move. "We need to close the gap before they can adjust." The crew worked in unison, executing their orders with precision. The Odyssey's systems roared back to life, pushing the ship closer to the Phoenixian cruiser. Ilara's eyes glinted with determination. They had the upper hand now, if only for a moment. On the Phoenixian cruiser, Varys was not without his own strategy. The drones were a nuisance, but they weren't the true threat. It was the humans themselves, relentless, unpredictable, and adapting faster than he could keep up with. This was no ordinary enemy. The Phoenixians had fought countless wars, but this was something new, something different. He slammed his hand on the console in frustration. "Why haven't they broken yet? Why haven't they retreated?" As if to answer his question, the Odyssey made its move. The human ship darted forward, firing its own powerful beams at the Phoenixian cruiser's power core, striking near its engine compartment with pinpoint accuracy. The Odyssey's weaponry was crude compared to Phoenixian technology, but it was becoming clear the human ship didn't need the most advanced systems. It only needed to be persistent enough to keep the pressure on. The shields around the Phoenixian cruiser flickered once again, and Varys knew that time was running out. The humans had figured out how to survive, but what they had failed to calculate was what came next. The Odyssey wasn't just fighting for survival. It was fighting to take the first step toward rewriting the entire galaxy's history. The Odyssey's engines roared as the human ship closed in, the Phoenixian cruiser looming large on their screens. A steady rhythm of fire, evasions, and counterattacks had turned the battle into a deadly dance of strategy. But every second that passed brought a new realization. The Phoenixians were holding back, as if they were waiting for something. Varys had shown patience, but how much longer would it last? Ilara stood firmly in front of her crew, her mind already calculating their next move. The drones had done their job, but they couldn't keep the Phoenixians off for much longer. The Odyssey's power levels were dropping, and their resources were limited. If they didn't end this soon, they risked everything. "Status report, Nash," Ilara said, her voice steady but intense. "Shields are at 42%, Captain. We've taken a few hits, but we're still holding. Weapon systems are at 60% power and recharging, Lieutenant Nash replied, his tone tense but focused. Good, Alara replied, eyes scanning the readouts. She could feel the pressure building, the weight of the decision on her shoulders. The Phoenixians were formidable opponents, and their ships were built to withstand even the harshest of conflicts. But humanity had one advantage that no alien species could ever replicate: human willpower. Prepare for a full assault. We'll have one shot at this, Alara declared. Captain, I'm detecting a sudden increase in their power output. They're preparing a full barrage, Nash warned, urgency in his voice. Alara's heart raced. She had anticipated that the Phoenixians would escalate their attacks, but now she realized the true weight of the battle. This wasn't just about fighting back. This was about survival. If they couldn't outsmart the Phoenixians, the Odyssey would be destroyed. Everyone, brace yourselves, she ordered. Deploy the secondary defense grid. The moment they fire, I want us to be out of their firing line. Alara turned to the helm. Set course at 25 degrees port side. Maximum speed. The crew responded immediately. The ship lurched, and the Odyssey surged forward, narrowly dodging a barrage of energy blasts from the Phoenixian cruiser. The shots lit up the void of space, bright blue streaks of deadly power, but the Odyssey was already moving. But just as they were about to gain distance, Varys made his move. On the Phoenixian bridge, Varys gritted his teeth, his focus unwavering. Deploy the suppression field, target their engines. He knew they couldn't afford to let the humans escape. The time had come to unleash their full power. With the press of a button, a deep, resonating hum filled the cruiser's bridge as the suppression field activated. The space around the Odyssey warped, its systems suddenly slowed by a deep gravitational pull, making the human ship sluggish and vulnerable. Now, fire, Varys commanded. The Phoenixian weapons unleashed with a roar, a cascade of energy beams that collided with the Odyssey's shields, sending shockwaves throughout the ship. For a brief moment, Alara was thrown to her knees as the force reverberated through the hull. The lights flickered and alarms blared, but they weren't finished. Yet. Shields are holding at 30%, Captain, Nash reported, his voice strained. We're starting to lose power in the auxiliary systems. If they hit us again, we can't let them hit us again, Alara interrupted, standing tall once more. Her gaze locked onto the view screen. The Phoenixians had revealed their hand, and she could feel the shift in the battle. They were no longer playing for a quick win. They wanted the Odyssey gone. Her mind raced. The suppression field was a formidable weapon. It could neutralize their speed and power, but it wasn't perfect. If they could push just a little further, if they could outthink the Phoenixians one more time, they might have a shot at victory. Launch the countermeasure drones, Alara ordered. The small, stealthy drones that had once confused the Phoenixian. Sensors were now repurposed for a new task. They weren't just distractions anymore. These drones were fitted with experimental EMP charges capable of disrupting the suppression field long enough for the Odyssey to escape. As the drones shot from the Odyssey's hull, Alara kept her focus. The Phoenixian cruiser was closing in, their weapons charging for another strike. The suppression field intensified, making the Odyssey feel like it was dragging through thick tar. But the drones were closing the gap. EMP drones are in position, Nash called out. Activating now! The drones exploded in rapid succession, sending shockwaves of energy through space. The suppression field flickered, then collapsed. The Phoenixian weapons halted, their targeting systems scrambled, unable to lock onto the Odyssey in the chaos. Now was their chance. Full power to engines! Take us in closer! Alara shouted. The Odyssey's engines surged back to life, the ship's inertia propelling it forward now faster than before. The Phoenixians were reeling from the surprise counterattack. The humans had shown that they could adapt at a pace no one had expected. As the Odyssey closed the distance, Alara saw the Phoenixian cruiser's shields flickering. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The Odyssey was no longer just trying. To survive, it was ready to strike back. Target their power core, full disruptor fire. The Odyssey's weapons flared as they released a barrage of high-powered beams, aimed directly at the Phoenixian cruiser's weakest point. The shots tore through the remaining shield layers, striking the core with precision. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as both ships hovered in space, the tension hanging heavy. Then, a massive explosion rocked the Phoenixian cruiser. The power core detonated, sending waves of light and debris across space. The Phoenixians had underestimated one thing. They had underestimated humanity's willingness to do whatever it took to survive, to innovate, and to fight. As the Phoenixian ship began to break apart, the Odyssey emerged victorious, though the battle was far from over. The galaxy would now know that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and that would echo in the stars. The Odyssey hovered in the wreckage of the Phoenixian cruiser, its engines sputtering but holding steady. The stars that had once seemed so distant now felt close, almost oppressive in their silence. In the wake of their victory, the crew was left with the stark realization that the battle had only just begun. Alara stood at the bridge, gazing at the chaotic display of drifting debris, some of it still glowing from the explosion. The ship had survived, but it wasn't unscathed. "Damage report, Nash," she said, her voice firm, though exhaustion tugged at her words. "Minimal damage to the hull, Captain. Shields are at 18%, but we've stabilized. Power levels are fluctuating, but nothing catastrophic." Nash paused, looking up from his console. "We've lost 2 of the secondary thrusters, and the warp drive is offline, but we can manage. It's not pretty, but we're still in the fight." Alara nodded, feeling a mix of relief and unease. They had survived, but for how long? She turned, her attention to the view screen, where the glowing debris from the destroyed Phoenixian cruiser drifted slowly into the vast emptiness of space. "Commander Varys is going to be furious," she muttered under her breath. The Phoenixian leader was not one to take defeat lightly, and he had no doubt seen their power core explode. There was no way he'd back down without retaliation. "Yes, Captain," Nash agreed. "They'll come after us. We've proven we can fight back, but that also makes us a target." "Then we make sure we're ready when they do," Alara replied, her voice hardening. She turned toward the tactical display. "Deploy the remaining drones. We'll need eyes on any incoming ships and a defense system in place. Get the engines back online as soon as possible, and I want full scans of the surrounding area." "Aye, Captain," Nash said, already issuing commands to his crew. Alara's mind raced. They'd dealt a serious blow to the Phoenixians, but she knew. The galaxy's most aggressive empire wouldn't be defeated by one strike. Varys had underestimated them this time, but there was no guarantee he'd make that mistake again. In the distance, Alara knew there were more ships out there, more threats waiting to strike. Meanwhile, the crew of the Odyssey worked tirelessly to repair the damage, each action marking the dawning of a new era for humanity. They weren't just defending themselves, they were proving something fundamental. They were proving that humans could survive, adapt, and fight with relentless will. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. This was a war for respect. "Captain," came a voice from Lieutenant Sol, the ship's communications officer. "I've intercepted a transmission. It's not from the Phoenixians, at least not directly. It's encrypted." Alara turned toward the officer, intrigued. "What does it say?" Sol's hands flew over the keyboard, decrypting the message with rapid precision. "It's a warning," he said, his voice carrying a hint of disbelief. "They know what happened to the Phoenixians. Whoever sent this knows we're still here, and they're not happy about it." Alara's brow furrowed as she read the translation of the message. The words were sharp and threatening. "The galaxy has watched you, Earthlings. You may have struck a blow, but now you have drawn the attention of more than just the Phoenixians. Your kind will be eradicated before you can ever hope to build a true empire. Prepare yourselves. There is no place in the stars for a species that fights without reason. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she read the final words. Prepare yourselves. The message hung in the air like a dark cloud, foreboding and heavy. The Phoenixians had lost their fleet, but now others would come. She could feel it in her bones. Who sent this? Ilara asked, her voice cold. Saul shook his head. We don't know. The signal is too scrambled, but we're working on tracing it. The crew fell into silence, the weight of the transmission settling over them like a thick fog. No one spoke, but everyone understood. The galaxy was no longer a quiet place. Humans had made their presence known, and now they would have to fight for their survival, not just against the Phoenixians, but against anyone who decided that the human spirit was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Ilara exhaled slowly. They had already defied the odds, but the true battle was still ahead. She had no illusions about what lay in store. The universe had underestimated humanity's resolve before, and it would make the same mistake again. But next time, the cost would be much higher. All right, Ilara said, looking at her crew with determination. We've got work to do. Prepare for any eventuality. I want every person on this ship to know what's at stake, because what comes next? She paused, her gaze hardening. We're not just fighting to survive anymore. We're fighting for our place in the galaxy. The crew nodded, their faces reflecting the same hard resolve. Humans were no longer just a blip on the galactic radar. They were a force. And when humans fought, the Odyssey drifted through the void, its crew working tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable. Ilara paced the command deck, her thoughts as turbulent as the stars outside. The message they had intercepted was still fresh in her mind, a chilling reminder that the Phoenixians' defeat was only the beginning. More enemies, unknown yet powerful, were now aware of humanity's existence, and they wouldn't wait long before striking back. Captain, we're receiving another encrypted transmission, Lieutenant Sol called from the communications station. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Another warning? Or worse, a direct threat. Patch it through, Sol. The transmission crackled to life. The voice that emerged was deep and cold, carrying the unmistakable tone of authority. Humanity, you have been warned. Your defiance has not gone unnoticed. You are but ants in the grand scheme of the galaxy, and soon the weight of the stars themselves will crush you. This is your last warning. Retreat into the shadows of your own world, or face extinction. The message cut off abruptly, the silence following it thick and suffocating. Ilara clenched her fists, the words reverberating in her mind. The challenge had been made, and this time it felt different. Whoever was behind these threats didn't just want to win, they wanted to annihilate humanity. Who sent that? Nash asked, breaking the silence. That didn't sound like any species we've encountered. I don't know, Ilara replied. But I'll find out. Her mind raced. The message had been clear in its intent, but its origins were unknown. Humanity's victory over the Phoenixians had sent ripples through the galaxy, ripples that were drawing the attention of the unknown forces now threatening to bring them down. Ilara turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Rios. Any movement? From the Phoenixian fleet? Have they regrouped? Negative, Captain, Rios replied, his face tense. We've been scanning for the past few hours, and no new ships have entered our sector. It's possible they've retreated to lick their wounds, but something doesn't feel right. Ilara glanced at the star maps on the screen, her thoughts spinning. The unknown threat is still out there, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. We're a target now, but I'll be damned if we let them just walk all over us. She turned to her crew. Prepare for a full scan of the nearby sectors. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Whatever's out there, it's not just the Phoenixians we need to worry about anymore. As the crew got to work, Alara's mind kept turning. She had always been a fighter, but this was something different. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's capacity for survival and ingenuity, and now they had to face the consequences. The enemy they faced wasn't just a threat to the Odyssey, it was a threat to everything humanity had built, everything they stood for. Captain, Nash's voice broke through her thoughts. We've picked up something. It's a small fleet, heading in our direction. They're cloaked, but we can make them out on our long-range sensors. Ilara's pulse quickened. She knew what this meant. They had been located. How many ships? She asked, her voice steady but with a sharp edge. 4, maybe 5, Nash replied. They're still a few hours out, but they're fast. We might not have enough time to prepare. We'll make the time, Ilara said firmly. Prepare the weapons. I want every system online and ready to fire. A sense of purpose washed over the crew. They had fought against the odds before, but this time it was different. The enemy wasn't just the Phoenixians. They were faceless, unknowable, and seemingly unstoppable. And yet, as Ilara watched the crew move with precision and determination, she knew something the enemy didn't. Humanity had a spirit unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain, Rios interrupted, we've got a new signal. It's coming. From a nearby asteroid field, but it's weak. Too weak for a ship. Ilara's brow furrowed. A distress signal? No, Rios replied. It's a message. It's human. Ilara's heart skipped. She turned quickly, her eyes locking onto the screen. From who? I don't know, Rios said, frowning. But it's encoded. It's using a human communication pattern, but the encryption is beyond anything we've seen. Whoever it is, they're in trouble, Ilara said. Open it, now. The transmission flickered onto the screen, a scrambled jumble of static and data. As it slowly decoded, a familiar voice emerged, faint but unmistakable. Ilara, Captain, this is Commander Tessa Kor. We've been stranded. We're deep in the asteroid field. Phoenixian ships were here. It's a trap, Ilara. A trap. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. Ilara's breath hitched. Tessa, she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. She's alive. The crew fell silent, all eyes on their captain awaiting her command. Get us to that asteroid field now, Ilara ordered, her voice filled with renewed urgency. We're not leaving anyone behind. As the Odyssey surged forward, Ilara could feel the weight of the decision settling over her. The stakes had just been raised. Whoever was behind the threat to humanity was playing a long game, and they had just made their first mistake, underestimating the human will to fight and survive. The crew of the Odyssey wasn't just going to survive. They were going to fight back, and they would do it with everything they had. The galaxy may have underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The Odyssey was headed straight into the heart of danger, and nothing. The Odyssey tore through the darkness of space, its damaged engines humming with effort as they pushed the ship toward the asteroid field. The crew was on edge, knowing they were racing against time. Tessa Kor, a trusted commander and long-time ally, had sent them a distress signal, weak, fragmented, and cutting off just as she mentioned a trap. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Ilara as she stared out the viewports, the jagged silhouettes of distant asteroids growing, larger by the second. Captain, the asteroid field is just ahead, Rios said, his voice calm but taut with anticipation. We're entering it now. Ilara nodded, her grip tightening on the armrest of her command chair. Increase speed, but be ready to drop to half power. If we need to maneuver fast, we can't afford to take any chances in there. Aye, Captain, Nash responded, his fingers flying over the console. The ship's engines roared as they accelerated, the asteroid field now close enough that the viewports were filled with the sharp angles of spinning debris, rocks, and dust clouds. The comms officer, Lieutenant Sol, stepped forward, eyes scanning her terminal. "Captain, I'm picking up more signals from the field. They're faint, but they're human. Commander Kor's signal is still alive, but we're getting interference from something else. Possibly Phoenixian cloaked ships nearby." "Damned Phoenixians! Never give up," Ilara muttered. "Stay sharp, everyone. This could be another trap." The Odyssey slipped deeper into the asteroid field, the ship's stealth systems activated to avoid detection. Every thrum of the engines, every vibration beneath. Their feet felt like an ominous countdown. "Keep our shields powered up," Ilara ordered. "Rios, map out the safest route through this mess. We're not fighting blind." As Rios worked, Ilara turned to Nash. "Once we find Tessa, we need to get her out of there, fast. The moment we're on the ground, we can't stay. We need to be prepared for more than just Phoenixians. This trap could be bigger than we realize." Nash's gaze sharpened as he responded. "Understood, Captain. We're ready for whatever's coming." Suddenly, the ship shook violently, throwing Ilara off balance. The walls creaked, and sparks flew from several nearby consoles. The emergency alarms blared. "Report!" Ilara barked, scrambling to her feet. "Impact!" Rios shouted, slamming his hands onto his controls. "A small asteroid cluster. Shields are holding, but we've taken some minor hull damage. We're still good, Captain." Ilara swore under her breath. "No more collisions. We're not out of this yet. Keep it together." The asteroid field was alive with movement. Chunks of rock spiraling in erratic patterns, some huge enough to obliterate the ship if they collided. The sensors were overwhelmed by the dense clutter, and Ilara knew that if they didn't act fast, they could be ambushed by cloaked ships, or worse, other traps laid by the Phoenixians. Approaching a cluster of larger asteroids, Rios warned, his voice steady despite the stress. "I suggest we slow down to avoid detection. We can take the time to look for Commander Kor's position." Ilara nodded. "Slow to a quarter speed and prepare a drone deployment. We need to know exactly where Kor is and what we're walking into." The ship coasted down in speed, and the tension in the air was palpable. Every person on the bridge was silent, eyes locked on their respective screens, fingers hovering over controls. Ilara's mind raced, replaying the few fragmented words from Tessa's distress call. "It's a trap. Phoenixian ships were here." The message had been clear. Humanity was up against more than they could imagine. Ilara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Humanity had faced the impossible before, but each time they adapted, they fought back, and they survived. This time would be no different. The Phoenixians thought they could break humanity's spirit, but they hadn't reckoned on what it meant to be human, resilient, relentless, and unstoppable. "Captain, drone deployment complete," Rios reported. "We've sent out 5 drones to scan the area. The closest one is within 100 kilometers of the signal's origin. We'll have a full readout in moments." Ilara nodded again, her gaze never leaving the displays in front of her. They needed to act quickly. Tessa Kor was more than a commander to them. She was family, and every crew member aboard the Odyssey felt the weight of that bond. They couldn't leave her behind. They wouldn't. "Sol, open a channel to all crew," Ilara ordered. "This is our moment. We've proven ourselves before, but what happens next will decide the future of humanity. No matter what we face, no matter what we find, we stick together. We fight as one. We are not backing down." "Aye, Captain," Sul responded, her voice ringing out in the stillness. "Channel open." Ilara turned to her crew, her face hardening with resolve. "Whatever comes next, we are the Odyssey, and we will not be cowed. We fight for each other, for Tessa, and for humanity. Do not falter. We make our own fate starting now." The crew stood a little straighter, a silent but shared strength running through them. Ilara could see it in their eyes, determination, trust, and the fire that had carried them this far. "Captain, we've got a hit," Rios called out urgently. "It's Commander Kor's position, and she's not alone." Ilara's heart stopped for a moment. "What do you mean? What's there?" Rios's fingers flew across the console, pulling up the drone's visuals. "Sir, we've got at least a dozen Phoenixian ships cloaked and waiting. They've set up a perimeter around her." Ilara's jaw tightened, her mind already working at full speed. "Then we'll hit them first. Get the drones to disrupt their cloaking systems. We'll take out the perimeter, then extract Commander Kor. Full speed ahead." The crew moved swiftly, every action sharp and decisive. Ilara's grip on the armrest tightened, her resolve hardening. The trap was bigger than they expected, but they weren't about to walk into it unprepared. Humanity had faced the impossible before, and this time they would. The ship's engines hummed louder as the Odyssey shot through the asteroid field. Ilara stood at the command chair, her eyes locked on the unfolding screen. The visuals from the deployed drones filled the central display. Phoenixian ships, their cloaking systems flickering as the drones unleashed electromagnetic pulses, revealing their positions like ghosts emerging from the dark. 12 of them, circling the coordinates where Commander Tessa Kor's signal was emanating. They were waiting, just like Ilara had feared. "We've got the perimeter," Rios said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "We can break through. If we hit them with everything we've got, the drones have disrupted their cloaks, but they're still heavily armed." Ilara nodded, her mind racing. "We hit them fast and hard. No time for subtlety. Nash, prep the main cannons. I want full salvo." "On my mark." "Aye, Captain," Nash replied, his fingers already moving across the controls to power up the ship's weapons. The Odyssey wasn't a heavy battleship. It was a nimble and powerful vessel, designed for quick strikes, strategic infiltration, and extraction. It wasn't built for prolonged dogfights, but it was more than capable of dishing out damage when needed. The Phoenixians, with their superior cloaking technology and larger fleet, were formidable opponents. But humanity had something the Phoenixians didn't: a relentless will to survive, to adapt, and to fight back. Ilara exhaled slowly, her eyes scanning the crew. She could feel the weight of this moment pressing down on her. This was more than a rescue mission. This was about proving that humanity would never kneel, never be cowed, and never give up. It was a statement to the galaxy that, no matter how many times humanity was underestimated or pushed to the brink, they would always rise. "Rios," Ilara said, her voice low but fierce. "Once we clear the perimeter, we get Kor and we're out of here. Full speed, no hesitation." "Understood, Captain. We'll make it count." The tension on the bridge was palpable, the crew moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Each person knew their role. Each person was ready for whatever came next. "Now!" Ilara barked. Nash fired the main cannons, and the Odyssey shuddered as a barrage of energy bolts shot toward the Phoenixian ships. The blasts were precise, hitting 2 ships directly. One exploded in a brilliant flash of light, debris scattering in all directions. Another ship faltered, its shields flickering and failing under the concentrated fire. "We've got their attention," Rios shouted. "The perimeter is breaking apart. They're trying to regroup. Captain, we need to move now." Ilara didn't need to be told twice. "Rios, get us to Kor's coordinates. Full speed ahead." The ship surged forward, dodging chunks of destroyed Phoenixian vessels, the wreckage flashing. By the viewports, Ilara's pulse raced as she focused on the mission. Commander Kor was out there, and she had no intention of leaving her behind. Not after everything they had been through. "We've reached the target area," Rios said, eyes flicking over his console. "Commander Kor is aboard a small ship. It's heavily damaged, but it's still functional. The Phoenixians are trying to trap her, but we can still get her out." "Deploy the boarding pod," Ilara commanded. "And I want a full scan of that Phoenixian ship. If there's anything we can use to our advantage, we take it." As the pod was deployed, the Odyssey turned, its weapons still active, fending off any remaining Phoenixian ships that tried to approach. The enemy ships, now scattered and damaged, were regrouping, but they were no longer in control of the situation. It was humanity's moment to strike back. The pod's airlock opened, and the rescue team, led by Captain Alara herself, boarded the smaller vessel. Inside, Commander Kor was slumped in her seat, covered in blood, but alive. Her eyes flickered. Open when Alara approached. Commander Kor, Alara said, her voice gentle but urgent. We're getting you out of here. Tessa's lips curled into a faint, tired smile. Told you, you'd come for me. Alara offered her a hand, helping her up. Never leave one of our own behind. As the rescue team moved to extract her, the sound of approaching Phoenixian ships reverberated through the hull. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Humanity had struck first, and now they would see it through to the end. Rios's voice came over the comms. Captain, the Phoenixian fleet is retreating. We've caused enough damage to their command ships that they're pulling out, but they won't stay gone forever. Alara glanced at the monitors, confirming Rios's words. The Phoenixian ships were withdrawing, their cloaks flickering as they made their escape into the far reaches of the asteroid field. It was a victory, though only a temporary one. We'll be ready when they come back, Alara said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. Humanity never stops fighting, never stops adapting. The crew of the Odyssey gathered around Commander Kor, who was now being supported by two of the medics. Tessa looked at Alara with deep gratitude, but also something more. Respect. It was the kind of respect earned only through blood, sweat, and fire. The respect that only humans, in all their grit and willpower, could demand. Thank you, Captain, Kor said, her voice hoarse. I knew you'd come. Alara looked at her crew. Every one of them standing unwavering, ready for whatever came next. The Phoenixians had learned something today, something they had never anticipated. The galaxy had been silent, peaceful, and content in its ignorance of humanity's strength. But no longer. From this moment forward, humanity would make sure the galaxy would remember their roar. You're welcome, Commander, Alara replied. Now let's finish what we started. And with that, the Odyssey turned, engines roaring once more, heading for the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because one thing was certain, the galaxy would never forget the power